unless I tell you, you could now speak. Just as a matter of courtesy. We will send you an evaluation form after the workshop, so you could give us your feedback about this workshop or any other workshops, because we are continuing to work on improving our content and what we provide for our community. And our slides are going to be available after the workshop, so don't worry. And as you could see, we are also recording this. So if you think of any colleague who really should listen to this or watch this later, you could forward it to your colleague. So I think with that, Dana, you want me to run the slide? Is that
Yes, please.
okay? So let me see if I could do that, and while you introduce yourself.
Thank you. So I have been with the Contra Costa DA's office for 28 years. More than 20 years ago, I started the Elder Abuse Prosecution Unit that our office still has. I have rotated through about every single assignment in our office, and as of Monday, I am the new supervisor of the Juvenile Prosecution Division. So I am in a new office on a new computer, and we had a little technical difficulties this morning, so thanks everybody for bearing with us. The reason that it is important talk about financial abuse of elders and real estate fraud is that, particularly in Contra Costa communities, seniors are targeted for real estate fraud. They are the group of people most likely to own a home and to have significant equity in that home. And financial abuse of elders, when it involves real estate, is very complicated. It's very difficult for law enforcement to investigate and understand. And so the DA's office has established partnerships with some of the other agencies in our county to try to educate and respond to instances of real estate fraud. And one of those great agencies, of course, is our Family Justice Center, which among the 5 domains of interpersonal violence, we include elder abuse. So can we have the first slide? So my goal is to have us better understand and avoid financial real estate fraud. The problem that I had in the 3 years that I did this work is when a house is gone, I can't get it back. And when financial crimes occur, typically the offender has spent the money, and we're looking at people in the later years of their life who should have had those resources for their comfort and their support. They earned them, they saved for a lifetime, and having to sit down with elderly people and tell them it's gone and I can't get it back, and a restitution order still has to be enforced is very difficult to do. So again, AARP is a great source of information in this domain, but they tell us in a recent study, characteristics of people older than 50 that make us, because I'm in this group, easy targets include, we expect honesty in the marketplace, right? When someone says something, they mean that, and we expect that your word is your bond. We're less likely to take action when we're defrauded. We're less knowledgeable about our rights, and it is an increasingly complex marketplace. I struggle to explain things to my 81-year-old mother about why she needs to stop trusting people and not to click on things on her phone. We're also more likely to be home than our younger neighbors. People that are retired answer the phone and respond to things on their cell phones, and a lot of these unsolicited offers show up there. They are in, as a result, easy reach of solicitors. The FBI recognizes Americans having reported losses over $145 million from real estate-related fraud in 2023. Next slide, please. And so the Contra Costa DA's office created a major financial crimes unit that I headed up for the last 3 years until I moved up for juvenile on Monday. And in that unit, it's one of the very few places where the DA's office participates in investigations. We are a prosecution agency. So law enforcement typically does our investigations and brings them to us when they're completed, and we determine whether the evidence meets the constitutional standards for filing criminal charges. But because of the complexities of real estate fraud, We have a specially trained investigator that supports these investigations. So in our unit, we investigate and prosecute complex, organized, sophisticated financial crimes in the county. And for real estate, we partner with the county clerk recorder in order to do prevention. Again, prevention is the most important aspect for us because it is so difficult to heal the harms caused by real estate fraud, which typically involves a fraudulent transfer of the ownership of a home or fraud relating to foreclosures where people are unable to make their mortgage payments. In our other partnerships involve participating in the Adult Protective Services multidisciplinary team meetings and the Financial Abuse Strike Team meetings, the FAST team. We provide community outreach and training to raise awareness through trainings like this one right here. One of the things we cannot do, however, is give legal advice. So I am a public prosecutor, which means I represent the community. I cannot represent an individual person or give that person advice on what to do. And what we'll do, we have a legal assistant who does a lot of triage, and she will refer people to other legal resources for that. And a lot of times, for the next slide, please. One of the things that we're having to explain to people is this, while it may be fraud, it's not criminal fraud. And it's not something that my office can respond to. Not all cases of fraud become criminal cases. Some involve civil, which is one party suing another party, usually for damages involving money. And when we're looking to see whether the evidence supports a criminal prosecution, I have to A, find a crime that's in the penal code, and B, have enough admissible evidence that overcomes the accused person's constitutional presumption of innocence. And then I have to be able to convince 12 people beyond a reasonable doubt that the accused person is guilty of the offense I charged. It is the highest standard of proof, and it's supposed to be the highest standard of proof. So not everything bad that happens involving real estate makes it into a prosecution in our office. Let me talk a little bit about what the county clerk recorder's office does, because until I got into this assignment, I really didn't know. I do know Kristen Conley because she used to be on the Family Justice Board of Directors, and I've been with our Board of Directors since it started for about the last 8 years. So our elected recorder in Contra Costa County is Kristen Conley. Every county has one, and they create and maintain a public record of all real property transactions, including sales, liens, which is things you owe that get attached to your real estate, easements and map filings. And this allows owners, purchasers, sellers, creditors, and others who are interested in a particular property to look at these public records and determine legal rights, titles, and interest in that particular property. You can find out more about them on their website. They have a really good public website. I think we skipped a slide. There was a slide that talks about who my team is. Can you go back one slide?
Sure, just 1 second.
Sure.
This one?
Still the same one. There we go. So, whoop. You were there and then you moved. At the DA's office, the major financial crimes team has one prosecutor. It used to be me. Now it's Matt Karen, who will be excellent in that assignment. We have 2 senior inspectors that help us with investigations and 1 legal assistant. We're housed in the district attorney's special operations division, which is excellent because it gives us access to 2 forensic accountants. And this is the one place where we can take reports. So if we have somebody who believes they have been part of real estate fraud, we have a fraud hotline, and here's the number at the bottom. And we have a complaint form that you can access at the DA's website and print. And the more information you give us, the better we are able to respond to what may have happened to you. We cannot take complaints over the phone. That's really important because real estate transactions are so complex. And so we ask people to fill out our complaint form and include all evidence that supports your belief that criminal fraud has occurred. So let's go back to the slide after the county clerk recorder's office. We talked about okay, so let's talk about what they do. Documents involving real estate get recorded, and that means they're filed at the recorder's office. When that happens, they become public records. They are filed when they are properly executed and the required taxes and fees are paid. The recorder's office does not look beyond the document itself to verify its validity. You have people whose job it is to receive and file things, and that's it. They are not in a position to investigate whether or not this document should have been filed. Also important to know is that any person can go to the county recorder's office and present a document for recording against a particular property. And that means that documents can be recorded when they are fraudulent, and documents can be recorded when they are not legitimate documents. Do we have questions in this presentation? Did we do that?
We can, if this is the right kind of time you want to stop for questions, we could do that. And
Okay, well, we had, I
raise the hand.
had the poll questions. Were we going to do the poll questions?
Yes, I can. Do you want me to do the first one?
Yes, please.
Okay.
Okay, so everybody, what do we think about this? If a document relating to real property was recorded at the clerk's office, true, false? It is, in fact, true and accurate.
Good question. Let's see if people would respond. Natalie, I don't see the responses. Oh, there we go. People started responding.
There we go.
Okay. All right. So if a document was recorded, doesn't mean it's true and accurate. So 4 people said true. Let's see if other people will respond. Maybe you cannot see at the bottom or on your front page. Oh, you know what? I think Natalie, all the questions I think were
Oh, I think they're, yeah,
together.
they're all on one, unfortunately.
Okay.
I'll give it another minute and then we'll talk about the answer.
Would all the question needed to be answered?
No, we'll just do number 1 and then I'll end it and we can see the results. And then we'll do number 2 and I'll end it. We can see the results.
That would be great. Okay, so let's talk about the results right now. Why don't you end it now?
Okay.
This
We're
is
just
a
looking at
question
number 1.
Yes. So the question is, if a document relating to real property, for example, a deed, if that document was recorded at the county clerk's office, then we know it's true and accurate. That is false. And the reason it's false, let's go back to the slide that we're on right now, is the role of the county clerk's office. Their only job is to make sure the piece of paper is filled out correctly and that the fees and taxes are paid. If you think about it, they can't analyze the legality of that document. They're not lawyers. And they don't know the facts and the circumstances. They don't know what was presented to the person who signed it. They don't know if the signature belongs to the actual human whose name that is. And that's not their role. Instead, what we have is the crime of filing a false financial document. So anything that is false or fraudulent and gets presented to the clerk's office for filing, we make that a crime if it's false. We don't have a way for the clerk's office to check on the legality of something before it is filed. So if somebody presents you with something or you find out that it's at the clerk's office, that doesn't mean it's true. That means that it was filed. There we go. Any person can go to the recorder's office and hand them something and say, file this for me. In fact, we're prosecuting cases involving violations of, let's go to the next slide, please. I think that's a later slide. We are prosecuting violations of Penal Code Section 115, which involves people presenting documents that are forged and presenting documents that are false and trying to get them filed, because then what happens is all of these other people who need to determine the legal ownership and other issues relating to this piece of property, they will go to the clerk's office and consult those documents and rely on them. Another prevention aspect that we rely on is notarizing a signature. Let's go to our next slide, please. So how many people have had a signature notarized? Where you just raise your hand. We've all had to stand there with your ID and put your thumbprint in somebody's book. And so what that means is a notary is a person whose job it is, once they've had special training and education and they've passed a test, getting certified, and they have gotten a commission from the Secretary of State that lasts 4 years. They can put a stamp on the document saying, I attest to the validity of this signature, meaning the person in front of me presented satisfactory evidence proving that they are who they are, so that the signature on the document that has legal significance should count. And so a notary public is required when a document needs to be signed and witnessed in order for it to be legally binding. And a lot of our real estate documents, like deeds and transfers, because they're so significant and your signature has immediate legal significance, we want to make sure that we can have sort of a chain of custody to establishing the validity of that signature. Let's go to our next slide, please. So notary publics certify the identity of the signer. And the way they can do that is you can show your ID to prove that you're you. You can have the oath of credible witnesses known by the notary, or 2 credible witnesses not known, saying that this person signed this document and they are who they are. When the notary has evidence to believe that the signature is valid and has no evidence to believe that it's not, the notary will apply their official seal, otherwise known as a stamp, kind of looks like the one on the screen, that identifies the notary by name, their commission number, the county where they work, and the expiration date of that commission. When you put your thumbprint in a journal, they hold on to that journal to document each transaction. So we will have many cases where property was transferred, the ownership of property was transferred through a deed, and we get a fraud complaint where the person says, I never signed that document, that's not me. So the first thing my investigator does is investigate the signature. We contact the notary, and law enforcement is, with probable cause to believe that there's evidence of crime, demand the journal, and we will take the fingerprint and send it to the crime lab. And then we come back and we say, hey, guess what? That is your fingerprint. So the problem is that you signed it, you just don't remember signing it, or you didn't read it all the way when you signed it. So we have had cases, and we're investigating one right now, where the notary swore under penalty of perjury that the person is standing in front of her was in fact the person who signed. That person had died 2 weeks earlier. So that is a case where we're investigating not just fraud in the transaction, but that the notary herself is getting paid to, or is somehow complicit in the fraud. So let's do our second poll question right now, Natalie.
And then we're just answering question 2.
Question 2, if a document relating to real property was notarized, true, false, it means that the person who signed it read and understood what they were signing. Is that what our notary can swear to?
More people are saying false. Are there special crimes or additional charges against notary public when they either make a mistake or make a false
So
attestation?
we could actually, so a notary public is supervised by the California Secretary of State, and we can report them to the Secretary of State, and they can lose their commission. kind of like having somebody who is licensed to be a lawyer or a real estate agent, and they're engaged in misdeeds or extreme negligence. You lose your commission. So one thing short of criminally prosecuting a notary is that they lose their ability to be a notary in the future. Good question. And let's look at our poll. It looks like false. Oh, we're neck and neck. The question again is, if a document relating to real property was recorded at the county clerk, if a document relating to real property was notarized, it means that the person who signed it read and understood what they were signing. That's false. And that's another misnomer that we get, even with law enforcement sometimes. We'll show them a document and the suspect will say, look, it's notarized. They understood what they were signing. A notary, again, they don't have that training and experience. Notaries, one of the things they can't give is legal advice, which means they can't explain the thing that the person is signing. And a lot of times we'll have people who are told, these are all just, they're good standard documents, form documents, they're fine, just sign them, don't worry about it. Terrible, terrible thing for people to sign things without having completely read them. Sometimes we have language barriers. People sign things in English and they're not proficient in that language, but they trust the person who's telling them to sign. And so the fact that something is notarized only lets us determine the identity of the signer, not that person's comprehension, not that person's having even read the complete document. So really important to understand that that's all that a notary does. A notary does not explain or even determine if somebody has capacity. What about somebody with some dementia features? Do you think a notary can determine whether or not a person with sundowners who's really good at masking their confusion, and they say, yeah, I understand. There's no way we could have a notary vouch for somebody's cognitive capacities. That's just impossible. And so that's what a notary does. Let's go to our next slide. We'll talk about some other aspects of fraud prevention. And this is the penal code section that I was talking about. When a person takes a document that they know is false or forged, and when they take that to the clerk's office in order to have it recorded, that person is guilty of a felony. The good thing is, if we find out about that in time, we can use the court to undo or set aside such filings. So in one example, we had a family member forged the parent's deed or forged the parent's signature on a deed, transferring 100% ownership of the parent's property to the child. And when the forgery was discovered, the court ordered that that document was deleted, and it had the effect of restoring the senior's property ownership to the senior. The purpose, according to the court in a great case called People versus Miller, and for the lawyers in this group, here's the citation. The purpose of this penal code section is to prevent the recordation of spurious documents knowingly offered for the record to protect the integrity and the reliability of our public records system. It's so important that we're able to rely on these documents being genuine, that we put the criminal liability on people who try to record things that are false or forged. In that case of Miller, we had a defendant who tricked an elderly homeowner into signing a purchase agreement. She thought she was getting a reverse mortgage. Instead of being able to stay in her house for her lifetime and getting financial support, her house was actually sold to a corporation, which then sold it to another purchaser, and the senior was evicted. The suspect was convicted for violating this penal code section, and the court was able to void that first deed and restore ownership of the senior's house back to her. And so that's a really important thing for us to know that is available. The problem is we have to be able to act fast in order to use that remedy, and that doesn't always happen in these complicated cases. Can we have our next slide, please?
Dana,
Part of our fraud, yes, ma'am.
I have a quick question about that case and that scenario. So
Yes.
the criminal court that is considering the case can actually set aside the real estate transaction. Or you don't have to file a separate civil lawsuit?
Not a civil lawsuit. So in that case, there was a criminal conviction for violating Penal Code Section 115. So the prosecutor petitioned based on that conviction for this relief, and the court was able to make a finding with notice to all parties that were involved. And you can bet that the third person who bought the house from the corporation was fighting this. But the reality is the forged deed was void, so it didn't have legal significance, and that void deed can be set aside as part of this criminal prosecution. You don't need a separate civil case.
Yeah, you could imagine how significant that distinction is, because most people don't have the means to actually file a separate civil suit. That's what really becomes a barrier. And then my second question
very
is, what is the statute of limitations for the criminal case to set aside the false transaction?
That's a great question also. And so it is 4 years from the date of discovery. So we're working on a case now that's it's an elder abuse real estate fraud case where the 81-year-old victim's son is her real estate agent and the defendant. And she is now homeless as a result of his conduct after she paid the mortgage in this case for 18 years. The house went into foreclosure, and he ended up with everything, and she ended up homeless. And because of the complexity of that case, it took us a very long time to investigate, and the conduct started 18 years ago. So we're able to go back in time because the date of discovery was recent and it was a continuing offense. And literally, we jokingly refer to this case where it starts with, in the beginning, there was son and he was bad. And that case is actually being transferred to Mr. Karen of my office, and we're scheduling a conditional examination of the senior for court later this month. Part of fraud prevention efforts in this county is the real estate fraud notification program, and you will see an example of the letter that the clerk recorder's office automatically sends out. And yay, it's bilingual, so it's in English and Spanish. We're open to maybe having it in other languages, but right now it's bilingual. And it's sent to every homeowner when title gets transferred to someone else. So I own my house. I have title to my house. Title is the legal way of saying ownership for a house. If it gets transferred through any legal document filed at the clerk's office, because that document might be fraudulent, we send you something in the mail that says, hey, did you know this happened? And it includes a copy of the first 2 pages of the document that got filed so that the homeowner can look at it and say, wait a minute, I didn't sign this. That's not my signature. And then it tells you to contact the district attorney's office, and we respond to these as part of our potential fraud investigations. This partnership program started in 2011, and Contra Costa County was the first in Northern California to start this. An example, we already talked about an example. Let's, next slide, please. Part of our fraud prevention program involves foreclosure advisory letters, and you can see that this one is still signed by me. They'll be signed by Mr. Karen going forward, but we send these letters to homeowners who had defaulted on a mortgage. So the mortgage is the loan you take to buy your house, and you have to make those payments every month. When you don't make those payments, you are in default. When you miss enough payments, the house, the property itself, is the security for that loan. And a foreclosure is the bank selling your house to pay itself back the loan, because this is what you agreed to when you get a mortgage. So notice of default will be the first notice sent to a homeowner saying that you might lose your home to foreclosure. When that happens, we send the foreclosure advisory letter to warn people of potential scams. And we identify legitimate resources to prevent or respond to potential fraud. So there are a lot of people looking. You can imagine how vulnerable and scary it is to be about to lose your home. And since these documents are all public record, there are people who look through these documents and figure out who the vulnerable people are and try to solicit their business and steal their money. We'll talk about some of those scams later on. Our office sends about 15 or 20 of these advisory letters each week, and we've had some great success. One example was a woman named Gloria who got one of these letters in the mail. She had just inherited her parents' home. She had no idea that it was in default. She called our office in response, and we were able to explain to her what was going on. The past due amount was $5,800. That was all that was owed on her parents' house that was valued at over $850,000. And it was a family house where she grew up. So she literally was able to save that house from foreclosure by gaining the awareness she needed to respond from this letter. Can we have our next slide, please? And this is an example of our complaint form, which you can find online at the DA's office. And if you have a client or if you yourself believe that you have been involved in actual fraud relating to real estate, this is a document that we ask you to complete and send back to us so that we can start an investigation. And time is of the essence. It's really hard for me or another prosecutor in my office to get back something that has already been taken, sold, resold, or spent. We have our next slide, please. These are the real estate fraud crimes that we typically investigate. Very important because, as I said before, not every bad thing that happens to people having to do with their homes can become a crime. I need to see evidence that we're looking at theft or forgery, the filing of false or forged documents, which we've already talked about, sometimes identity theft, people pretending to be you in order to steal your property out from under you. Next slide, please. Foreclosure fraud and foreclosure consultants, and we'll talk about some scams involving those folks, rent skimming, and of course, financial elder abuse and embezzlement. Let's go to our next, very good. We'll talk about some scams right now. So a lot of people work with seniors and are themselves in the legal field, so we know what power of attorney is. One of the things that I would see when I did elder abuse is a family member who has power of attorney and waves it around from a distance. I have power of attorney. And when you look at it more closely, it's that power of attorney over healthcare. So if my mom, who's 81, grants me power of attorney to make healthcare decisions, can I empty her bank account with that document? No. So powers of attorney are very specific when they give power over financial versus healthcare. So anybody claiming to be acting under a power of attorney, the first thing I would say is, can I have a copy of that, please? And then we look to see what that document actually gives power over. Sometimes the documents themselves contain limiting information. They have time limits, or they could be a springing power of attorney, which means some things have to happen first. An example of a springing power of attorney would be 2 doctors have to say that I lack capacity to make financial decisions before this document becomes active. A lot of times power of attorneys are notarized. So it's really important for us to make sure that the senior actually intended to grant these powers and their signatures aren't being forged. Very important, if I have power, if I have power of attorney to manage my mother's health care, if I have power of attorney to manage my mother's financial affairs, can I take my mom's money and spend it on myself? I basically have to run mom like a business. I have to do everything to support mom. When I did elder abuse about 20 years ago, Concord PD brought me a case where a woman had a townhouse and she was about 2 payments from owning it outright, but her drug abusing son moved his family into mom's house and was intercepting her mail and was spending her Social Security checks with power of attorney on his drug habit, not paying mom's mortgage, and she was in default and about to lose the home, and she had Alzheimer's dementia. So under all of these facts and circumstances, we went and had the court order the public guardian to take conservatorship over the senior. They were at the post office box when the Social Security check arrived, made the mortgage payment, saved the house, and son was prosecuted for financial elder abuse. abusing power of attorney, diverting the money. If you promise to use mom's money to support mom, which is what you do with a power of attorney, and instead you divert it to anything other than mom, you've committed the crime of embezzlement, and embezzlement involving a senior is financial abuse of seniors. Next slide, please. So forgeries for us involve people signing something when it's not the actual person. So forging the signature. Signatures are very important because they have immediate legal significance. So we will see allegations of forged signatures in documents transferring ownership of real estate or on powers of attorney. So the scammer forges a homeowner's signature on one of these documents. Sometimes there's a notary public stamp on it, which makes it look legitimate, but we need to then go back to the chain of custody of the notary journal and make sure that that signature really was the senior's signature. The deed is recorded because if it's correctly filled out and the fees and taxes are paid, the recorder's job is to take and accept that document and record it. And it effectively transfers property to the scammer without the knowledge of the true homeowner. Often what we'll see then is the scammer obtains mortgage loans and steals the equity from the senior's home. And when that mortgage is not paid, the lender forecloses. That's their remedy. The home is sold and the true homeowner is evicted. And with my case where our 81-year-old was evicted, she lost everything. She lost all of her belongings. She didn't have the money to maintain things in storage. She lost property that had been all she had to remember her own mother by. And just this completely depressing to have worked so hard to have provided for herself in retirement. And because of this fraud, she lost everything. Can we have our next slide, please? We'll talk about foreclosure rescue scams. And this was a huge issue for us during the pandemic. And we're still seeing it starting to resurge now as we're in some economic instability as this new administration does some interesting things with taxes. There is there's a group of professionals called foreclosure consultants. That's a legitimate business that can be done criminally. So in the scams, we'll see foreclosure consultants who use public records to find homeowners who are in default, meaning they have missed payments on their mortgage. These very vulnerable, intimidated, scared people get contacted with this claim that I'm going to help save your house. I'm going to cure the default. I'll get your loan refinanced. And a lot of times, folks, their only asset is their home. They don't have credit that allows them to refinance in a way where they can make payments that they can afford. And so this seems really attractive. And these vulnerable, scared people are told, we need to act quick. You're going to pay me for my services up front. I'm going to have you sign power of attorney so that I can act for you when you're not around. And I need you to sign over the property to me as collateral or security for the work that I'm going to do for you. And people trust because they're desperate and they're scared. And they do all of these things. And they find that this person does little or nothing for them. The house goes into foreclosure and they lose it anyway. You can find all about foreclosure rescue scams from the state of California Department of Justice website. I put the link here. They're so prevalent. Can we have our next slide, please? It's really important to understand what a foreclosure consultant can and can't do. The Mortgage Foreclosure Consultants Act is law that was actually passed to safeguard the public against deceit and financial hardship, prohibit representations that tend to mislead, and encourage fair dealings in the rendition of foreclosure services. This act provides both civil and criminal penalties, and importantly, it requires a written contract. And all of these things where somebody is verbally promising you they're going to do X, Y, and Z, and they walk away from those promises. Verbal promises are literally unenforceable because there's no evidence that they exist. And so the law prohibits these practices. And for the lawyers in our group, we're looking at the Civil Code section 2945.4 can make it criminal, and there are civil penalties as well. It is illegal to require upfront payments, for the foreclosure consultant to demand excessive fees, for the foreclosure consultant to demand wage assignment, which means I am garnishing your wages to pay myself to do what? Nothing. It's illegal to use the property as collateral for loans. It's illegal for them to take secret payments from third parties because it's a conflict of interest. It's illegal for foreclosure consultants to demand power of attorney from the homeowner. And it is illegal for them to do anything without a written contract. In fact, it's illegal for them even to try to get the homeowner to enter into a contract that doesn't comply with the law, and it's illegal for them to pressure a homeowner to give up their rights. There's a great example lawyer people in this group, In re Still, which is actually a bankruptcy case, and this involved a mail solicitation where homeowners who were unsophisticated first-time buyers with young children and were days away from losing their home to foreclosure. They signed and did whatever they were told. And there was no contract. They signed promissory notes promising to pay for loans that never came through. And in the end, their house was sold. It went into foreclosure. They were evicted, and all of the money that they could have applied toward bringing the payments current, which instead went to paying the foreclosure consultant, they lost that too. And so now we have families out on the streets having been scammed out of everything. And a lot of people don't understand that they were victims of crime, and they just feel like they were cheated in a bad business deal. And so we don't always get people knowing who turn to a potential criminal investigation. Let's talk about rent skimming, which is our next scam. So what we'll see here, it's so bad we had to pass a law prohibiting this as well. Foreclosure consultants will offer homeowners a loan or fast cash in exchange for taking over the homeowner's mortgage and title temporarily. If you sign your house over to another person and they verbally promise to deed it back over to you, but then they don't, what's your remedy? That verbal promise, there's no evidence of it. And so this is how we're seeing people's houses stolen out from under them. But the offer will be that you're going to use my good credit to refinance your house, and I'm going to save your house for you. And what you're going to do is you're going to deed your house over to me, and then while I do all of the things I need to do to fix your house and refinance it, you're going to pay me rent to stay in your house, and I'll get your new financing. And I'm going to use your rent and keep paying your mortgage while I get it refinanced. That's a verbal promise. Do you think they keep that promise? No, they take all of the homeowner's rent money, they let the house go into foreclosure, and once again, the homeowners are evicted, they lose their house, they lose everything, and they lose the financial resources that could legitimately have been applied toward curing their default to rent as part of this scam. In the case of People versus Bell, we had defendants running a huge skimming operation, and they didn't have any physical location. They used P.O. boxes, they opened bank accounts and filed articles of incorporation under all of these fake names. They looked at the legal notices in newspapers to identify homes that were going into foreclosure, contacted these homeowners, and offered to assume mortgages and save credit if you just deed the property over. And stay and pay rent. Then they would file bankruptcies. When you file bankruptcy, it stalls foreclosure proceedings. and just keep this going over and over and over. The bankruptcy would get dismissed because it was not a meritorious bankruptcy, and then they'd file another one, and then file another one, collect all of this rent money from the people who thought their mortgages were being refinanced and that their house would be saved. And in the end, they would walk away and the homeowners would lose everything, including that rent money. And so those can be really devastating for families, and especially for seniors who don't have the ability to go back to work and earn money to purchase new real estate. Let's talk about reverse mortgage scams. Reverse mortgages are really important because those are very frequently marketed to seniors as a means by which you make your house work for you. And so a scammer will target senior homeowners who have substantial equity in their homes. And these are people often who are in a significant position of trust to that elder. And it's really important to remember that when we talk about a con artist, con is short. Con is short for confidence. And these are crimes that involve obtaining trust and confidence of somebody, and it's the last person that you expect would defraud you. So a lot of times it's a caregiver, it might be an IHSS worker, it might be a family member who points out to the senior that, hey, see this big house that you're living in? This house should support you instead of the other way around. And the scammer starts by hiding all of the disadvantages to a reverse mortgage, starting with the fact that a reverse mortgage is a loan. The loan has high closing costs. It has high fees. It accrues interest every month. The senior still has to pay his or her property taxes. They still have to pay their homeowner's insurance. They have to pay whatever HOA dues. They have to make all maintenances and repairs. And they have to live in that house full time. Failure to adhere to those terms of the loan mean that house will go into foreclosure. So a lot of times we'll see people who go into assisted living and have this home, and they're sold the idea that reverse mortgage can pay for them to stay in assisted living. It can't if one of the terms is that you live in that house full time. The idea is that you draw down from the equity in the house during your lifetime, and then when you pass away, the bank owns the house. A lot of times we'll see scammers encourage the senior to take the reverse mortgage and then invest in their business with that money, or use that money to pay them up front to provide care, and then the scammer takes off with all of the money. So the equity is gone, the senior can't make the payments, and they go into foreclosure. They lose everything that they had that should have been there to support them in their advanced years. Next slide, please. Title piracy. We just got one of these, and until I started researching it, I didn't know how prevalent they were. And this is a very scary concept, title piracy. We're having scammers who use public records to impersonate people who own vacant land or property. So a lot of times people will have a second house, or they will have an income property that's vacant right now that they need to depend on in order to support themselves in their older age. In our case, we had homeowners who were temporarily living in another country for work, and this was the property that they were going to retire in when they came back to the United States. The vacant land, the people impersonating our homeowners went to a legitimate real estate agent, and they did everything online. After the pandemic, we all got really used to doing things online. They used fake IDs. They acted only online. They themselves claimed to be out of the country, and they said that they were having a medical crisis. They needed to sell this house fast, and they wanted a cash deal. Well, what happens when a real estate agent closes a deal fast? They get commission. So they're acting on the real estate agent's natural inclination to want to get paid. These deals can be finalized in a matter of weeks, and the true owner had no idea. So someone impersonating you hired a real estate agent to really sell land you really owe, and worse, the next set of victims, is the people who really bought it. These can be really complicated cases to undo. In our case, the cash transaction, I can't prove who the real people were who were impersonating my victims. And so I can't do anything for them. It is impossible to trace cash transactions. Crypto is just as bad. Cryptocurrency transactions, it's impossible to trace. The notice of sale or change in title was mailed to our homeowners, to their PO box, and was ultimately forwarded to them in Hong Kong. And by the time they got the mail, it was too late for them to do anything about it. Next slide, please. Let's talk about promissory note fraud. Anybody recognize this house? This is Graceland. Elvis Presley, from the grave, was a victim of this scam. Promissory note fraud. In these cases, a scammer creates a false promissory note showing that you, the homeowner, owes them money and the collateral is your house. They will forge your signature. They will record a deed of trust using your property as collateral, and there's a notary stamp on it, which makes it look legitimate. And of course, we know that the clerk recorder can't detect fraud. They don't have psychic powers, and their job is to accept documents for filing when they are correctly filled out and the fees are paid. And so this gets recorded. You may never know about this recorded deed during your lifetime. And then the scammer claims that the fake loan wasn't repaid according to the terms and moves for foreclosure. So Elvis's heir, his granddaughter, finds out that Graceland is in foreclosure. And this became a civil case, and the fraud was uncovered because the notary was able to explain that they lost their stamp and someone forged their notary stamp. So the notarized document, when they researched the signature, the notary was the one to break the case wide open and say, that's not me. I didn't notarize that. My stamp was lost and I should have reported it, but I didn't. And so that's how that identity theft case back in 2024 was solved involving Graceland. So the claim was that the investment company loaned Lisa Marie Presley $3.8 million back in 2015 with the deed to Graceland as collateral. So I thought that was a great example of how they're just assuming that nobody would notice that if, Graceland goes into foreclosure. Let's go to our next slide and we'll talk about some warning signs.
Dana, just
on the lookout. Yeah.
Dana, just one question
Yeah.
about that previous
Oh.
example, because earlier you mentioned that when there is some sort of recording on your property, you get a letter from the district attorney's office. So would a
Yes.
promissory note recording, a promissory note also, would you also get the kind of letter from the district attorney's office?
You would get, I don't think so. That's a great question because it would be a change of ownership, and that would just be a recording of the fact that the property is alleged to be collateral. So one of the things we'll talk about is ways that we can prevent fraud is everybody should go to the clerk's office and look at their own deed. And you can do that and ask to see anything that is attached to your house. And if it looks like fraud, then you can take care of it before it becomes an actual foreclosure action. I do see Mr. Harris's question. I don't have numbers in terms of the frequency so that we can lobby for legislative changes and protective measures. But that's something, contact the DA's office and see if our office can partner with you on that and see if we can help provide you with that data. That's not a question I can, even if I had it, it would have to go through our public information officer. And next question was, how will heirs know if the promissory note is fraud? That's a great question because, of course, Lisa Marie is deceased. And so I think that was the scam, right? You claim that before this person died, they signed something promising to do X. And in researching the legitimacy of the signature, they found that the notary was able to say, I never actually validated that signature. Let's go to our next slide, and we'll talk about some fraud warning signs. So one of the things that homeowners should be on the lookout for is stuff that comes in your mail. I hate looking at the mail. It feels like it's a bunch of junk mail. I go to the mailbox maybe once a week. That's terrible. Check your mail every single day, because if you get a notice that fraud potentially has occurred, time is of the essence. If you receive in the mail official documents relating to a property transfer and you have no knowledge about that transaction, don't just set it aside. Take action and look into it. Go to the clerk's office and check yourself. In our elder abuse case, she called her son, who said, don't worry about it. And because she trusted him, she didn't. She didn't know who else to call. Where else would she have gone to get more information? If you receive in the mail mortgage documents or a payment book for a loan that you never took out, that's a sign that fraud may have occurred in relation to your real property. If you're looking for your property tax bill, and they always come twice a year, right? Or you get evidence that it's part of an escrow account, and you get a notification from the bank that it's been paid, but it doesn't come like it should. Check into that. If someone else owns your house, the property bill is going to that. If you own property that is that is unoccupied or vacant, and there is mysterious construction or unsanctioned for sale signs, or somebody else is living there, then we're looking at fraud involving that property. And it's really important for people who own a second home or an investment property or vacant property, check on it regularly. These scams work when people don't check on that kind of property because they're out of state, they're out of the country, it's just not on their list of things to do. So we need to be checking on those properties, because that, for most seniors, for most of us, real property in the state of California is your retirement. Let's go to our next slide, please. So warning signs for people whose property may have gone into default or the beginning stages of foreclosure. If you get unsolicited contact from anybody about your default or your foreclosure, and that person pressures you to act fast, pay cash, pay up front, sign quick, sign without reading, or without getting independent legal advice, then red flags for every single one of those things. If you are told by any company or any person that they can guarantee that they can stop your foreclosure or get your existing loan modified, red flag. There are no guarantees, but you're desperate and you're scared, and everybody wants to believe this person who appears to be a professional, and this is their business and this is what they do. If any person or company advises you or the homeowner to stop paying your mortgage and pay them instead, what did we just hear? All of these people who verbally promise to get your mortgage situation sorted out. If you're paying them instead of your mortgage, you are getting deeper into default. If they're not applying your money to the mortgage, your house will go into foreclosure and you will lose the house and you will lose the money that you paid this person to. If you are trying to work with a foreclosure consultant and that person will only meet you online or in a public place or at your house, then you should be very suspicious. Legitimate professionals have offices and business cards and other things that establish their legitimacy. People that will only meet you in person or in public or not in their office are trying to prevent you from figuring out who they are, who they really are, so that we can investigate and prosecute if they defraud. Let's go to our next slide, please. And we'll talk about tips to avoid real estate fraud and scams. We talked about this one a little bit already. Everybody should go to the clerk's office, say hi to Kristen, and ask to see your own property records and make sure that your title is clear, that there's nothing on your title, there's nothing attached to your house that you don't know about or that shouldn't be there. If you have vacant or unoccupied property, visit it regularly so that you can make sure that you're not going to be the victim of title piracy, where someone impersonates you to sell it. Do not have my bad habit of not checking your mailbox. One of the bad things that happened to my elder abuse victim is when she was evicted from her house, she had a P.O. box and she didn't check the P.O. box because she's 81 years old and it was difficult for her to do that. And all of the documents that went there, because when a house is sold at foreclosure, if you have equity in your house, then that gets, you get to keep the equity in the house. If there are liens on your house, so you owe money, the liens are satisfied by the equity and you order that they're recorded. The first thing that gets satisfied is your mortgage. And then once the mortgage is paid, what's left over is your equity. That should have gone back to my elder abuse victim, over $220,000. What she didn't know is that her real estate fraud son kept his name on her title. And he had over $500,000 in liens for judgments and tax fraud. And so because she didn't check her P.O. box, she didn't see mail from the company that handled the foreclosure saying that this is where the equity was going to go. And not only did she lose her house, she lost 18 years of mortgage payments that set up that much equity in it. All of it went to pay her son's debt, and she had no idea. Had she checked her P.O. box, she could have responded sooner, and we might have been able to prevent that aspect of the fraud. Really important, get independent advice before signing anything. Ask detailed questions and consider a second opinion. If you were at the doctor's office and you got bad news about a diagnosis, the first thing we would do is get a second opinion. So now you're at a foreclosure consultant's office, or you're talking on the phone with somebody who promises to save your house from foreclosure, or to do anything having to do with your real estate, which is your most valuable asset. If you don't know what you're signing, or if that person gives you a stack of papers, like with a lot of us, and says, these are just standard, you need you to sign real quick, and you just sign and sign and sign without looking at them or understanding them or reading them or having someone else advise you, this is a terrible thing for you to do, then you are setting yourself up for fraud. Read and understand all materials that are provided to you before signing anything. This is particularly important for individuals who have English as their second language. All of these documents are written in very formal English. And if you have somebody who's telling that person, it says this, but it means that, just sign it, then we're looking at people who signed something, but they didn't necessarily understand it. It is very difficult for me to prosecute anything where the person agrees, yes, I signed it, but he told me it meant X when the document itself says Y. I can't prosecute, and you also can't have a civil case. The agreement is what's in writing, not what the person also told you. Big red flag, sign this, we'll fill in the details later. Never, ever leave blank spaces on a document that you sign. You can't control what gets filled in there next. Don't agree to any promises or conditions that are not in writing. Remember what we learned about foreclosure consultants? Everything has to be in a written contract, and those terms are limited by law to make things fair to people who are in vulnerable and distressed situations. If you ever receive an unsolicited offer of help, research it. It's amazing what you find out when you just Google something. You can find out that things are fraud or fraudulent. Contact, I'm pretty sure Bay Area Legal Aid is in this class somewhere, or another attorney, or even contact the DA's office to determine whether or not this may be suspected fraud. If we can't give you advice, we can connect you with resources where you can get advice. Never, ever pay cash up front. Remember, if you're working with a foreclosure consultant, the law requires that there's a written contract and that all work has to be done before that person gets paid. Because most of the scams involving people in foreclosure are give me all your money and then I run away without having done anything and you lose your house anyway. And that was a lot of, oh, we have one more question. Go back to our one more question.
I think that's your last slide, Dana?
Oh, yeah, we'll do one more slide and then we'll do the question.
Yes.
Thank you. It's very important to understand what a notary actually does. Today, we've learned, and some people had relearned, that all the notary does is verify the identity of the person signing a document. There is no ability for a notary to determine whether a person read or understood what they were signing. And recognize, too, that just because something is notarized doesn't mean it is legitimately signed by that person, because we've seen examples where the notaries themselves are involved in the fraud. And notarizing, we're investigating a case right now where the person had died 2 weeks before the notary swears that that person was in front of them signing a document. Never, ever give personal information online or over the phone. I get texts constantly, we all do, telling us that, I got one this morning from UPS telling me I need to verify my information so that my package can be delivered. And it's just another way of phishing to get your personal identifying information so that you can become the victim of an identity theft. If you are going to work with anybody in a transaction involving real estate, meet that person in person, get a business card, research them personally and their business to make sure it's not a false name, it's not a PO box, it's not somebody who will hide their identity as part of perpetrating their fraud. Never pay in cash, never agree to accept cash, and do not work with crypto or wire transfers in dealing with real property, because none of those transactions are traceable. I can't have a law enforcement officer or my investigator use the transaction to trace where the funds went in order to find them and get them back for you. I can't use analysis of the financial transactions to determine the identity of the people involved in the fraudulent transaction. And so when we work with legitimate financial institutions and we're working with credit cards or checks or cashier checks, then those documents, those instruments are traceable, and that's the safest way to transact business. Most importantly, if it's too good to be true, it usually is. Anything where there's a guarantee, anything where you're going to be saved, anything where the person seems like a good Samaritan who out of the goodness of their heart is going to, having never met you, use their good credit because yours is too bad to refinance. If it's too good to be true, it probably is. And one of the things that we learned that makes people 50 and over vulnerable to fraud is we're unlikely to report it. Let's change that right now. If you believe you have been the victim of potential fraud, report it. You can start by making a consumer complaint to the DA's office, and we will tell you whether we can take action on it or whether we should direct you to somewhere else. Number one, I can't fix it if I don't know about it. Number two, the fraudsters continue to victimize others if they are not held accountable for what they're doing. And there's great tips on the Freddie Mac website for avoiding title fraud, especially that which involves property and identity theft. We do have one more question, and then I see some raised hands, so hold on one second. We'll do our last question. And then will have some time to open this up for questions.
Not me. Oops, stop sharing. Let me
We did
relaunch,
our first and final question.
and it's number 3.
Yep. Question number 3, foreclosure consultants are legally permitted to take upfront payments from the homeowner before doing the work, have the homeowner give them power of attorney over the homeowner's finances, work without a written contract, all of the above, or none of the above. What do you think?
It looks like E's taking the lead so far.
Yeah, this is a drum I've been beating a lot during this presentation because it's so important for people to understand that foreclosure consultants exist, they're real, and they are regulated. They are regulated by state law because the fraud with unscrupulous foreclosure consultants was mammoth, and the consequences were mammoth. And so foreclosure consultants cannot get paid first for work they promise later to do. They've got to do the work and then get paid. They cannot ask the homeowner for power of attorney over that person's finances because that's like writing them a blank check. They cannot do any work at all without a written contract because in writing, everybody can see what was promised. And if what was promised wasn't done, then that's a contract, and breach of contract can be grounds for at least a civil lawsuit and might be evidence of criminal fraud as well. So very important if a foreclosure consultant becomes involved with our homeowner, they can't get paid first and do the work later. They can't take power of attorney. They can't work without a written contract. All right, that's the end of my 3 questions. We've got some time for questions, and I can answer some, but again, I am still prevented from giving legal advice to individual people, so I can answer questions as part of the presentation, but not as part of giving anybody personal legal advice. And
Well,
Susan, do you want to?
So I think we could stop recording here because,
Okay.
you know, the context will be different and we don't